Well, welcome back to the PerfectMatch Franchise Podcast, where we talk about all things franchise business and ownership. I'm one of your hosts, Steve, and this is my co-host, Dylan, and today we have on special guest, Scott Satell. Scott is the local owner of a growing niche fitness franchise concept called The Exercise Coach, and is also now a franchise consultant. And in my opinion, he's had a very interesting career journey in getting to where he is today, including living in Europe for 5 years as he worked as a senior executive of an international playground equipment manufacturer. With that being said, Scott has a genuine passion for entrepreneurship and has taglined the concept of building better lives through business ownership with Thrive Franchise Search Firm, which is his franchise consulting business. Scott, welcome to the podcast. Thanks for being on.
Thanks a lot. Thanks, Steve. Thanks, Dylan. Thanks for having me on your podcast. I've been listening to you guys for a while now, and now I get to be on the podcast.
That's
absolutely,
right.
Absolutely. And what I always like to start with, Scott, if you don't mind just telling us just about your professional journey from where you started and what has led you to the franchise space and being in this building today.
So, I've actually had a pretty interesting journey. I, worked a lot as a kid, all the way from paper routes to selling subscriptions to papers to washing dishes on Saturdays from 3 in the afternoon till 3 in the morning when I was 15.
Yeah.
And then I worked summers selling cookware door to door, and a lot of the things I still fall back on were lessons I learned from the cookware business. So I did that, and then I went to college. I was an economics major, and I wrestled in college, and then I went to law school at Villanova.
Nice.
I practiced law for a few years in Florida on commercial litigation and antitrust litigation. And that was going well for me, but I was attracted to this firm in Orlando because they were all entrepreneurial guys. They owned the largest savings and loan in Central Florida. They had the largest home builder, and I thought I could learn a lot from those guys.
Yeah.
And I wanted eventually to end up in the business world. So when my stepfather was a manufacturer's rep in the toy business, and he concentrated his business on selling to Toys R Us. And when Toys R Us expanded into Europe, that's when I went to Europe. And it was, I represented a swing set manufacturer, but also represented a lot of other companies, and it was an independent business. So I wasn't an employee, I was a partner in the business. So that's kind of started my journey in business ownership.
Yeah.
Very cool.
And so that was great. We lived over there in London for 3 years, in Belgium for a little over 2 years. And eventually my oldest daughter, who's 29 now, was born, and we decided it was time to move back. So moved back to the United States, and with a partner kind of took over running the business, and we were in that until Toys R Us went out of business about 6 or 7 years ago. And then that's when I learned that, you didn't want to have any dependencies. You
Sure. wanted
to, have something where you had some real equity in the business. We were a service business that, with just one customer.
Yeah.
So in the meantime, I stayed as a manufacturer's rep, but got more into the outdoor business and represented a company that had a big business at Costco, but nowhere else. And I worked with Home Depot and Lowe's and Target and Walmart and all of those type of big box retailers and got them placed there.
Mm-hmm.
Eventually, they got bought by private equity. And I thought, now what? Because I knew the private equity people were not going to pay me more; they were going to pay me less.
That's how it works usually.
Yes.
That's how, yeah.
So and at the time I got called by a franchise consultant, and we explored a lot of different options, and we settled in on the exercise coach. So I gave you a long answer to a short question.
Yeah.
But so that's how I ended up here.
Perfect. No, that's an awesome story, and it's pretty cool to hear that. I love hearing entrepreneurial journeys. So just focusing on kind of your process and what was it like finding the exercise coach? Did you always know that you wanted to be in the fitness space, or did you go in with a blank slate and kind of fall into the niche? So, just explain that a little bit.
One piece of advice I don't always give to people looking for franchising is to go in with a blank slate.
Mm-hmm.
I really didn't. I didn't want to go into fitness. I always had a passion for fitness. Like, since I was in 8th grade, I was getting up at 5:30 every morning, training before school, and it was something I loved and always had a passion for. But I also saw what gyms looked like, how big they were, all the equipment they had, and I didn't want any parts of that. But when I worked with this franchise consultant, and we looked at a bunch of different areas, and when he started talking about the exercise coach and boutique fitness in general, I realized that there are niche players in the business that fill a need.
Sure.
And so I showed an interest, and this 20-minute workouts twice a week. When I was 13 and joined Mainline Nautilus, which was the first Nautilus in the area.
Mm-hmm.
They were preaching that back then, and so I knew that could work. And then the fact that we target people that are a bit older, people that really the stakes are higher when you get older as far as your fitness. You're not talking about running a faster mile, you're talking about survival and quality of life.
Right.
And so I joined an exercise coach, the closest one to me, and I worked out there for about 2 months to make sure I liked it. And I could see the differences almost right away.
That's awesome.
And I knew it was a great concept, and I knew we could change people's lives for the better. Now, I got into the business because it's a business and to make, a profit, but I also wanted to make a difference.
Yeah,
and
definitely.
so it's been a great journey. We've only been open for a year, but it's worked out great because the equipment, the concept, that's all very good, and you have to have that. But what makes a difference here is the people. Like, we have great people that work here, and we have great clients. And our people that work here, they can't wait to see the clients every day. Our clients, it's the best part of their day. These are people that maybe never really, fitness was never important to them in their lives.
Sure.
And the last thing they thought they'd want to do is come in here and work out. And they look forward to it every day, not because it's easy, because it's not, but because of the atmosphere here and the way they're treated. And so that's been the most rewarding thing for me.
And you can feel that walking in here, just so you know, from a third party, meeting the staff and you, and I know your clients probably feel the same way. You can feel that. You can't fake that. You know, that's not, you don't buy that from a franchise. You get some of that, but then it comes down to, like you said, the people, and that's great.
We've been really, really lucky here.
That's awesome. Yeah, and I was going to say, with an exercise coach, they give you all the tools, right? But you got to be the builder. You got to be the one to implement the tools, because you can have a great system, but if you don't have a good operator that's working in that system, it's not going to work. So, I think this is a really cool testament to not only the exercise coach giving you the foundation, but then you really excelling at following the protocols. And that kind of leads me into my next question is, how much support and training has the exercise coach given you, and what's been your experience in that capacity? Was it pretty much exactly what they told you right out from the gate of what the expectations were? And
yeah, it's been pretty consistent with what they told me. First of all, before you open, there's a ton of training.
Sure.
And before anybody gets hired here, first of all, before anybody starts working with the clients, they've got to take this whole online course, train you. Then they have all kinds of stuff in the studio that they have to do, and then they're videoed and pictured, and they tests and so forth in order to be certified.
Yeah.
They can't work people out until they're certified. They may have CPR certification, they may have personal training certification, but when we open, my two pillars are Phil and Marianne.
Yeah.
Marianne had been a personal trainer for 25 years and Phil had an exercise science degree and was, had been personal training for a number of years. They still had to pass all of the exercise coach certification and all of that, all the training. And so that's been great. Then there's ongoing things, and they've gotten better at. There's been a recommitment to business training too, to working through. In fact, just before you got here, we were on a group call.
Oh, cool.
That of things that we're working on and so forth. So yeah, they've been excellent, and you really need that. And for anybody looking for any franchise out there, I think that's one of the important things. How are we trained? What's the ongoing commitment to training us and so forth. So
Definitely.
And here it's been good.
Yeah, no, that's awesome.
And that's great to hear both angles too, because you're uniquely, your passion and your business experience really kind of aligns here, but that not every franchise owner has that experience. So to hear them giving you that extra support, right, on the business side too, not just, hey, here's how we make sure we work people out great. That's I think what really separates the good brands from the great ones, and that's good to hear, right?
Exactly. Like and for the employees too. I hate to even refer to them as employees. For my coaches, most of my coaches do have a passion for fitness, but if I was doing another franchise, if I was doing a home services franchise or something, all these people could be good at that too, because they're people. They're workers, they're people, they're reliable, and so and it's not just the franchisee that's important for it, but also the employees. I think.
No, I agree. Yeah, for sure.
And then you mentioned that you were a franchise consultant. How did you kind of get into that space as well? Was it purely due to your experience with using a franchise consultant to find the exercise coach?
Yes. Before that, I didn't even know there was such thing as a franchise consultant.
Which a lot of people don't. It's not. It's not common.
But once I got into first of all, I really enjoyed the search. I had a good franchise consultant. He was very helpful. So I enjoyed the search, and I almost wanted it to keep going on because I loved learning about all these different companies.
So needless to say, it was a good service.
Yeah. And so afterwards, first of all, I started subscribing to a number of podcasts of people that were in the business. And so every morning, I exercise every morning, and I was going for a walk or whatever, and here I'd have on the earphones listening to a podcast. And then I'd go back, I'd do research on the companies. I love the idea of these small businesses and that are service businesses and all different kinds of businesses. So when I decided to get out of the rep business, I was deciding what I would do. I thought about buying, some more franchises, but as a franchisee is a great way to build wealth. It doesn't necessarily provide you with an income right off the bat, depending on how involved you are.
Definitely.
So I wanted something that I felt like could provide a steady income, and I want to continue to grow my franchises, in part because I want places to put the people that work here.
Absolutely.
But the other part is that, I just really became, very interested, became a passion of mine, franchising.
Yeah.
So when I had the chance, I started, I talked to my development person that had worked with me with the exercise coach, who knew a lot of people in the industry, and I had the opportunity to talk to a bunch of the broker networks.
Yeah.
And I settled on Franchoice, which is one of the very elite networks, and the culture there is unbelievable. I went to my first conference about almost a month ago, and everybody just is there trying to help you. It's unbelievable what they built, and so I've really enjoyed it. I'm working with a number of candidates now, and it's going great. I love imparting the knowledge. I love telling people about what I do because I think it's really exciting.
Yeah.
And you guys have been doing
I was going to say, Dylan and I obviously started our business and franchised it back in 2020, but, that's one of the drawbacks of having a franchise is that you do only have one option. So when you're talking to candidates, of course you want to promote your brand, but there was a number of people we talked to where the movie industry wasn't for them. And that's where the conversation ended. But we had great conversations with these people, and that's how we got into franchise brokering as well, because it was a means to allow that conversation to keep going.
Yep.
And really dig down to what are you looking to get out of a business, not just, what business do you want to get into, and kind of retro engineer the whole process from what are your goals and working back to here's some brands that I represent, regardless of what industry they're in, that might fill those needs. And that kind of leads me to my next question. Your tagline, building better lives through business ownership. How did that come about? And just give your thoughts on what that means to you. And obviously people can hear the words, but what's the meaning behind it?
Yeah, to me, the meaning behind it is we appeal mainly to people that are, getting up there a little bit in age. Not that young people, that this isn't a great avenue for them, but most of them aren't thinking this way yet.
Right, sure.
And, a lot of people feel trapped in what they're doing. When I thought about, I always thought it would be interesting to own community businesses, to have the ice cream shop, to have the gym, and the interaction with people in the community. I always knew that would be something that would appeal to me.
Right.
But I didn't realize that you could do a Rob's rollover to, finance it. Mm-hmm. And you could, I was always putting money in my retirement and didn't realize I could access it.
Right.
And so, I knew that often people feel trapped in their careers, don't know the way out. They need somebody to lead them, to guide them on the path. And, what we really do, and you guys know this, is we're just trying to make a connection. We're trying to find the perfect fit for that person based on what they tell us. Most of the time we spend talking to that person that's listening. We want to know as much about them, as much about what would make something the right fit for them.
Yeah.
And then we put them in our model and we match them with the right franchise. And the most important thing is for our clients to know, or our candidates to know, that that we're not salespeople. I've been a salesperson all my life.
Yeah. Oh,
So
And now I'm not a salesperson. I'm a consultant. That we're working for them, even though we're paid by the franchisors. It's free to them, but our job isn't to sell them on anything. We're going to connect them with people that are going to sell them. Our job is to, first of all, connect them with the perfect fit, and then guide them on the way. And that's, so I guess your question was building better lives through business ownership. Realizing that you can own a business and take control of your life and build equity in something that you can either put your family into or pass down in your family or sell at one point. That, it just creates a better life for people.
I love it.
Yeah, and I'm sure this happened for you. It sounded like, but my favorite part is when you get someone who goes, I thought about franchises, but, I like this, but, like you said, I don't know if I want to own a gym. And then you bring them to something, their eyes light up, and they go, I never even knew this was possible.
Yes.
Right? And there's a franchise where I can do this? And yes, exactly right. And it's just, that's amazing, when you make that connection. And to your point, especially for somebody who's, they've worked hard their whole life and they've got to this point, and you say, yes, I actually can get you not only in something that you look at logically and say, wow, I can make money and build something, but you're passionate feeling like around community, as you said, and being with a team like you have here that you love can actually match up, and that's a great feeling. And it sounded like for you had that, so bringing that to people probably brings a lot of joy too, right?
Exactly. And it's I think you were starting to say, it's how important it is for people to come into the process with an open mind.
Oh, yeah.
You guys know this. So many of your clients or your candidates leave the process with a franchise that they never would have thought that they
Yeah.
would get into.
Right.
Almost 100% of the
Oh,
time.
yeah. Oh, yeah,
It's,
always.
it's unbelievable.
So, that's one of the first things we tell them. Just please keep an open mind. We're going to talk about what's important to you, not about specific franchises or specific industries. We'll talk about it a little bit, but what's more important is what type of life you want to lead.
Yes.
What, how often do you want to work? Do you want to manage the manager? Do you want to be an owner operator? All these different things that will point us in the right direction.
Yep. Yeah, and then even having the insider knowledge that you have working with the franchisors, because you could have two fitness concepts, two same industry concepts that seem similar on paper, but if you met the teams, you'd say they are the opposite.
Yes.
So even that too, right? Matching the personality of what group do you want to work with, not just what lifestyle. It's all of it kind of together. And like you said, that's some people really got to keep an open mind to. They go, oh, they seem newer, and I go, well, I think you'll really like the team, and they start talking, and they go, I'm not talking to anybody else. This is the best ever, right?
Right,
and I'm sure you've had this
exactly.
all the time. Yeah, and I agree. I think people, it's one of the best parts of our job is going, okay, I know you don't think this sounds like a fit, and they get on the phone and they go, they're the best brand I've ever heard of. I can't believe this exists, right?
Right,
yeah,
exactly.
and then it's fun. So yeah.
Yeah, whenever
Yeah.
I'm talking to candidates, I always say that the business is obviously important, right? Like that's what we're doing. But the personality match is arguably more important. And I tell people, as much as one business may look good on paper, when you talk to multiple brands, you'll understand that each brand has a personality that you need to see yourself, meshing with. It's not just a match of business acumen, it's personality, because
Right.
the way that a brand engages in business is very indicative of your success.
Yep.
And I always use the analogy, just it's a simple one, but if you have a brand that's hyper aggressive on sales and they want you door knocking every single day because that's how the brand was built, and you don't want to do that, it's not going to be a good fit. It doesn't matter how good it looks on paper. It doesn't
Right.
matter how good their item 19 looks. Versus, say the exercise coach for you, I'm assuming it was more relationship building with the customer and making
Yes.
sure that you're matching the product to their needs and having wholesome reviews, which I just saw, that you had tons of.
It's unbelievable,
Yeah.
the reviews that we get. And 100%, you got to know who you are.
Yeah. Yep.
What are your strengths? It's, there's a couple things I always want to tell people when they start the process. One is, the first thing is what we talked about before, keep an open mind.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
The next thing is, know yourself. What are your strengths? What do you really want out of life? What do you want out of this business? Why are you here? Why are we talking? That's kind of the first thing you talk to them
Yeah.
about. And then the next thing is, do a deep dive. Do your, don't do shortcuts on your due diligence.
Yeah.
Get to know the people, and your development person, which is the salesperson that you'll be working with. That person's important in the sales process, but once you own the franchise, they're not really that important.
Right.
So attend all the validation calls. Talk to the people that they put up there. See, do you like them? Does what they say ring true? Talk to the franchisees. A lot of the franchisors have validation calls with franchisees. And those calls are really valuable, not just because you're not going to be on there by yourself. There will
Correct.
be other candidates on there.
Yep.
And a lot of times they'll ask good questions that you maybe didn't think of.
Yeah.
And then also call franchisees in your area. I went and actually joined
That's
the
awesome.
franchisee in the area.
Yeah.
So, and I learned a lot from that, and also from talking to the franchisee there. So don't do the shallow dive, do the deep dive. Really get to know it, get to know the management, get to know the marketing, get to know the sales, what it's going to require.
Yeah.
And then the last thing, and maybe this is the most important thing, is be ready for the fear and anxiety.
Yeah.
Right?
Yes.
At the end of the process, you're going to be asked to make a decision.
Yeah.
And, just like when you were a kid and you went up to the top of the high dive, and it seemed like a great idea when you were on the first rung of the ladder, and every rung later, it seemed like less of a good idea till you're at the top,
Yeah.
and you're going to have to jump off, and there's no turning back. Then, that fear sets in. But the fear, 99% of the time, is irrational.
Yeah.
And so we always tell them, tell me when you're starting to feel that.
Yeah.
And let's bring you back and talk to you about what's important to you. Why are you here? And,
Yeah.
that can overcome that fear.
And did you have that at that last moment?
Yes. I will tell you a crazy story.
I want a crazy story.
So the day I was supposed to settle, I hadn't been feeling well for the week before, and I finally went to the doctor.
Good idea.
And he says, you got to get to the emergency room.
Really?
So, and it turned out I had eaten something that gave me hepatitis A.
Wow.
And my liver was failing. So they took me into the city of Philadelphia, because they thought I was going to need a transplant.
Wow.
So I was in the next day was the day I was supposed to settle.
Of course.
So I had to cancel the settlement, and I think it's the first time they've ever had somebody cancel because of a failed liver. So
Yeah,
That is good news, though.
Yes.
That is good news. Yeah, for anyone interested.
Well, it's good news that you still went.
Yeah,
through.
right. Yes.
So, but your liver either heals itself or it doesn't.
Yeah.
And mine did, so it took about a week, but
Wow.
then I kind of was out of the woods and then I came back. But I was so weakened by the thing, it took me several weeks to do. So that you didn't know where that question was going, did you?
No, I didn't. No.
Not expecting
Well, and
that.
I do, not the last part of the story, but I do think it's good for people to understand if they get afraid and you have this awesome background and all the things you've done, and even you were afraid. So if this is their first business, their first time being in business, it's okay to be afraid. It doesn't mean that you're not cut out for it. It just means you're like everybody else.
Yes.
And that's totally okay. So that's what I like for people to hear. Even Scott was afraid. And all your background, right? You've been selling, you've done, been in business.
And went over to Europe.
You were still afraid like all of us, and that's okay.
Yeah, and what made me really afraid wasn't making the decision. It was writing the first check.
It's a big number. Yeah. For most of us to go, wow.
So
It's a good point, because a lot of times that is the friction point.
Sure.
You can be really, really excited and get to that point to where you have to sign the check, and that's where all the fear and anxiety really rolls in.
Yeah. And now when I look back on it, I think, gosh, thank God I went through with it.
Yep.
Thank God they didn't drop me when I couldn't close, or when, and I did take a while to make my decision. I'm grateful. Like this is such an important part of my life, and it's only the first part of the journey, because I'm, in the consulting now, which I love. I love talking to the people, helping. We kind of do the same thing in my consulting business at Thrive Franchise Consulting as I'm doing here at the Exercise Coach, is we're improving people's lives.
Yep.
Yeah.
And so it's great to be able to do that.
Yeah.
That's awesome. And then I guess the last question is just a fun one. Where do you see your business career going to? What are some future goals that you have? I know you had mentioned opening up potentially new franchises. Just some big goals that you have now that you've entered the space. What's next?
Yeah, my main focus right now is on the consulting business, and I want to be the best consultant out there. And there's a lot of good ones.
Yeah.
So that will take a lot of work. But I would like to have more exercise coaches and maybe get into another brand at some point. But so right now we're trying to build this up and have this meet its potential, and then there are some territories nearby that would be interesting. And like I said, I have great people, so part of what drives me to more territories is to be able to get them expanded roles so they can, they can get greater income, greater autonomy, and so forth. So
Very
that's
cool.
That's part of what drives me.
Yeah,
That's awesome.
Absolutely. Dill, anything else?
No, thanks so much for the time.
Yeah, thank you guys. This was great.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
I told you I talk a lot.
Yeah, you know what? It makes it easier versus
Yeah.
people who don't. But awesome. Well, thank you everybody for listening. Until next time.